Welcome back to the show, everybody. Don't forget, in about 15 minutes or so, Virgil Herring, PGA teaching professional and golf analyst, will join us to preview the Masters. But now, joining me live in studio, a guy that just happens to be one of my best friends and the best sportscaster in all of Nashville. Steve Lehman is here from News Channel 5 Sports.
You
Steve,
are too
good evening.
kind all the time with these introductions. I like the best friend part. Though.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good to see you. All right, first question. Got to get the first question out of the way. What'd you think of WrestleMania this year? I'm kidding.
You are going to have to fill me in on what happened. That is one thing in sports that is way out of my level of expertise, my friend.
Well, we're going to try and school you up. I'm going to coach you up within this next year. So, all right, let's get to it. Bryce Drew is the new head coach of Vandy men's basketball. And I remember when I was working back in Buffalo in the mid to late 90s when he was a player at Valpo for his dad, Homer, and that was a big rivalry game between them and the University of Buffalo. And I remember talking to one of the players at a game coming up, previewing the game. I said, what do you got to do to stop Valpo? And he just looked at me and he said, Bryce Drew, Bryce Drew, Bryce Drew. We have to stop Bryce Drew. He was an outstanding player. Everybody remembers that great shot he hit, the NCAA tournament game buzzer beater. And obviously he comes from good stock. His dad was a legendary coach at Valpo. I like his youth. I like his energy. He looks like a Vanderbilt guy. He sounds like a Vanderbilt guy. On paper, to me, this looks like a good hire. What say you?
I thought it was a home run hire, and I thought he hit a home run today at the press conference, JB. He was smart. He was in tune. I think he understands the culture, and that's something I said in takeaways on Sunday night. When you talk to people about the Vanderbilt job, you get kind of a wide range of the people like us who live here in Nashville, know how great this city is and how great the school are, that think that can be and should be a really good job. And then you talk to people around the country that maybe are coaches who aren't as familiar and just look at it from outside and think, wow, that's kind of tricky because that school is a really good school, which means it's harder to get guys in, which means it's harder to recruit, and if you don't recruit as well, it's harder to win.
Sure.
And so people look at it that way. Bryce Drew looks at it the way we look at it. The people here in Nashville look at it. Bryce Drew looks at it that Vanderbilt is a private school with great academic reputation and great reputation nationally amongst people, students, all those sort of things. And that makes it easier to recruit in his mind. It's a different type of player, perhaps, but he believes that if you embrace that, if you embrace the culture, you can have your most success there. And that's, to me, why Bryce Drew is the perfect fit, because he comes from Valpo, which is a private school, which recruits a little different type of athlete. He's already had success doing that. His family knows all about it. His brother Scott found a niche at a similar place, Baylor. You're talking about a religious school, private school in the Big 12. He's given them the most success the Bears have ever had on the basketball court. To me, I think the Drew family gets this. They know what's going on, and I think Bryce Drew is the perfect fit for Vanderbilt right now.
You were on top of this story from day one, and I remember you had told me that you had learned that Bryce Drew really wanted this job. And he mentioned in his press conference today, hey, I've had a lot of offers. I've had a lot of schools, come look at me. I've had the good fortune of getting offered a lot of jobs, but this is the job I wanted. And David Williams, when he said that today, he emphasized that. I was looking for somebody that wanted to be here, and Bryce Drew wants to be here.
There's a difference between coaches, John, that I have found that just want to climb the ladder. And it's whatever the next job is to ultimately get, I don't know, Duke or Kansas or whatever the dream job is. And then the guy who looks at it and says, what's the next job for me? What's the job that I can be the best in and do the most in my next stop? And I think that's what you saw with Bryce Drew. Here's a guy who's a great player, has NBA pedigree, has the bloodlines in the Drew family to have success as a coach, and then won immediately as a head coach at Valparaiso. People have wanted Bryce Drew from day one. When he was an assistant, before he even took the head job, people wanted him as their head coach. And he's stayed put. He was happy at Valparaiso. That culture, that place loves him and fit him. And so he always thought, if I'm going to take another job, it's going to have to be a place that I really believe in and that I believe that I and we can be successful at. And so he turned down several jobs. He was up for Iowa State. He was up for DePaul. He was in the mix right now for Georgia Tech and essentially said, I think Vanderbilt's a better fit for me than going to Atlanta and trying to compete there at Georgia Tech. So there have been other opportunities, but right away, when it became apparent Kevin Stallings was leaving, Bryce Drew reached out to some people and and just kind of let them know that if Vanderbilt is an opportunity for me, I will be very, very interested.
Interesting stuff there. Let's talk about the guy that he's replacing, Kevin Stallings. Obviously, you know my ties to Pittsburgh, having lived and worked there, covered sports there for well over a decade. The reaction amongst the Steel City fans and the Pitt fans is not very good. They're not too excited. They had dreams about Sean Miller coming home, to his hometown and coaching the Panthers. I'm sure that, they thought maybe there was a way they could lure Calipari, who's from that area. That probably wasn't going to happen. But I tried to tell people that, people I stay in touch with on Twitter and friends of mine, when you look at the way Stallings coaches as compared to Jamie Dixon, the one thing you're going to get more offense. You're going to get more of a spread offensive attack, guys that can shoot the ball. Everybody in Pittsburgh saying this is a terrible, horrible hire. I'm not ready to label that as such yet. What are your early thoughts on Stallings going to Pitt?
I have mixed emotions about it. I see why Pittsburgh fans are frustrated, JB, because
they wanted a guy like Bryce Drew, probably, right?
In some ways, they hired Jamie Dixon light, so to speak. It's a guy that, like Dixon, had been at his school for a long time, probably with less success than Dixon had had at Pittsburgh, and now he's moving into a tougher league in the ACC where Pittsburgh is. But I think you're right. I think he's different in some good ways for them. He's going to bring them more offense. He's going to bring them a different type of guy, probably speed them up a little bit, which they could use in the ACC, which generally plays a much more up-tempo pace as opposed to the old Big East teams that really, they just want you in a street fight when you get on the floor. So I think some of that can be really good initially for Pittsburgh, and then it's going to be up to Kevin Stallings to do the rest. I also think that Kevin Stallings gets a bit of a bad rap around here because of the way things ended.
Sure.
The last few teams have been disappointing. Some teams just weren't very talented. This year's team underachieved. Even probably the best team he's had in the last 5 or 6, the team with Jenkins and Ezeli and Jeff Taylor, underachieved throughout much of the season, only got to the second round of the NCAA tournament. I think a lot of Vanderbilt fans think of those teams and think, so frustrating, we haven't been what we want to be, as opposed to looking at the whole.
That's exactly the way they feel at Pitt, by the way.
Right. For 17 seasons, Kevin Stallings did more at Vanderbilt than anybody else has done. He's the winningest coach there. He had a 17-year tenure that by and large was good. He got them to 7 NCAA tournaments, which is the most over a 17-year period that's ever happened in the program. And by the way, the 4th best over that time of any school in the SEC. Only Kentucky, who you'd expect, Florida, who had the great run under Billy Donovan, and Tennessee have had more tournament appearances out of the SEC than what Vanderbilt did under Kevin Stallings in that time. So while that wasn't great, and I think Vanderbilt can be better, I also think it's a mistake to color his entire tenure as disappointing and a failure down the stretch. Because when you look at it by and large, he's been a very, very good basketball coach for quite a long time.
And I just think the fresh start for him, the fact that he's going to the ACC, you're going to be coaching against Tony Benton, Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Jim Boeheim, at least for a couple more years. If that doesn't get your juices flowing, then you need to check your pulse.
If he's not refreshed, he's going to get refreshed really quick when they start kicking his tail.
That's right.
Because night in and night out in that league is no joke, and that is for sure. And that's the thing about the SEC right now, which is exciting for Vanderbilt fans with Bryce Drew, is this is not a gauntlet. Kentucky's going to always be good with John Calipari's teams. I think Florida will get back there. I like Michael White a lot as a coach. I think Rick Barnes is going to do some things eventually at Tennessee. You've got some other coaches
Alabama started to come on under Avery Johnson.
I think surprised people with how well he did in year 1. I think Ben Howland and Mississippi State's going to make them better than they've been for a while. Obviously, Billy Kennedy's doing a great job at Texas A&M. But this is not murderer's row in the SEC. So if you're Bryce Drew, come in, recruit a little bit, have some success. He's a very good X's and O's coach. He, by the way, plays a fun style, a lot of freedom for guys on offense. I think Wade Baldwin's making a huge mistake to go to the NBA because I think Bryce Drew would be the perfect kind of a coach for him to play for if he came back. But I think that exciting style with some players could really win a bunch of games in the SEC in the next few years.
You know, it's funny because I always felt like there was kind of a disconnect between Wade Baldwin and Kevin Stallings, especially this past year. And some people have hinted that that might be the case that I've talked to. I agree with you. I think Bryce Drew would be the perfect coach for a very smart, very confident point guard like Wade Baldwin.
Absolutely, and he just understands offense because he was a great scorer himself, but also he went to the NBA. And if you know Bryce Drew at all, and I've talked to a bunch of people who know him really well, he's a student of the game.
Yeah.
And he said it today. I love this line. He said, look, I played for a long time, and I was the best players on teams. You know, when he was at Valpo, he was a 2-time Mid-Continent Player of the Year.
Right.
And I was the worst player on teams when I was in the NBA. So he totally gets it. And I think in those years he was the worst player, he basically was becoming an assistant coach. He was understanding all the little nuances and watching his head coaches and how they operate. And I think that benefits him greatly as he moves on in his career as a head coach.
Up against the break here, we're going to get to Virgil Herring on the other side of the break, talk a little Masters. But I want to get your quick thoughts. I mean, folks, we're just a few weeks away from the NFL draft. Oh, by the way, Titans have the #1 pick. There's been talk about possibly, Dallas moving in or another team moving into that #1 spot. I maintain it. I've said it from day one. I still say stay at 1. Take Laramie Tunsil. Jalen Ramsey's going to be a great football player. But right now, you need to protect your quarterback, Marcus Mariota. As we sit here less than a month away, where are you with the Titans in the NFL draft?
Got asked that exact question on a radio show earlier today with Chris Mannix. And I said exactly that. From all indications from John Robinson, he needs to protect his franchise quarterback. That's sort of been what Amy Adams-Strunk laid down there last season when she got rid of Ken Wisenhunt. And so I think if you put a gun to my head a month out, that's what they're going to do. They're going to take Laramie Tunsil. They're going to shore up that offensive line. Luan goes to the right side. You got 2 first-round picks up front there. I think they build around that, trying to protect Mariota and look at all those other holes elsewhere.
Can you stick around and talk to Virgil Herring with me? We're going to talk a little Masters. Stay with us. We'll be back. Virgil will be on the phone. We'll talk Masters from Augusta. Who's going to win? Is this Brant Snedeker's year finally? Stay with us.